What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN Postgame, Ethan, and it's another nail biter with the Grizzlies. What's new? They got Ja back, we got Keldon back, and basically you got a really similar game to the one we saw on Monday in Memphis. So, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, really the only difference was we had a solid first quarter, and then they completely outplayed us in that second quarter. It was 44-25 in that second
Mm-hmm.
quarter. But other than that, you're right. We were competitive the whole way. We got behind, but we stayed within about 10 points pretty much the entire game. Did everything that we could, all the little things to stay within that 10-point margin. And at the end, we made it a game again, got it down to a 3-point game, couldn't capitalize, and the Grizzlies ended up winning by 6. So it's the same scenario that we've been dealing with pretty much all year, where we're playing competitive ball games, but we just other teams are better than us at this point. They have more
Yep.
talent and they have more cohesion and chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it doesn't help that Keldon went 1 for 7 from 3. I know he had 24 points. We were talking about how he was able to get to the free throw line 11 for 12. It's funny, Jude. You mentioned he's kind of playing similarly to how he played when he was a rookie and a sophomore, kind of just barreling to the rim,
In
getting and
games where
getting.
he's not shooting well, right?
I kind of want him to do that even when he's shooting well, because if he does that
I
and
agree.
he shoots 4 for 7, 3 for 7, we have a completely different game on our hands, and we say Keldon was the MVP of the night. So I hope he continues to do this approach, and his shot just kind of he finds itself. But to me, the big three was Jakob Pertl and Jay Rich and honestly, Zach Collins and Trey. Oh, and Trey Jones. Excuse me. Trey Jones kept us into this game the entire way. We were texting back and forth. 2 for 5 from three, 9 for 19, six
Mm-hmm.
assists. But it was his scrappy play offensively and defensively. He was really getting after the Memphis guards. Had a couple steals in the open court that
Mm-hmm.
really changed the momentum. It felt like. And when it felt like we were on our heels and Memphis was really starting to get um, that momentum going, Trey Jones did something to turn it around in our advantage. So shout out to Trey. He continues to impress in Devin's absence, both as a scorer and as a facilitator and just as a leader on both sides of the court. But there's really nothing negative other than Keldon's shooting performance. Other than that, I felt like the entire team played pretty well, but Memphis just, they have more talent.
Yeah, Romeo got 18 minutes tonight, and also didn't shoot that
Yeah, that's
great.
also a negative.
Um, but that was the only other thing that was popping out to me. I
Mhm.
completely agree with you for the most part. I mean, Sohan made some rookie mistakes; those happen every game.
Yeah.
And you saw Pop call that timeout and then like sit him for the rest of the
Yeah.
game. But that's one of those learning experiences that he's going to have. But just to touch on some of the other stuff that you said, you talked about obviously not able to hang on in the fourth quarter, and this puts the Spurs at they've got to be now. I forget what the number was last time, but and then like somewhere at least in the 20s whenever it comes to
Mhm.
going into games in the fourth quarter with the other team having the lead, being down. And
Yes.
another stat with that also that I heard on this broadcast was just when it comes to halftime. The Spurs are 2-23 this year when trailing at half. So now they're 2-24. They did enough to hang around in that second half, like you talked about. You mentioned how this one was kind of the inverse of yesterday's game, or Monday's game against the Grizzlies, where the Grizzlies came out hot, and then the Spurs kind of cut into the lead going into halftime. Where this time the Spurs came out hot, and then the Grizzlies had a 44-point second quarter. And the big difference there, just talking about that a little bit, was the Grizzlies only had 3 assists in the first quarter, so we were able to force them to play a little bit more ISO. Obviously, everybody's still kind of feeling out the game in the first quarter as well, but we forced that. And then the second quarter, they had 11. So, there's an offensive explosion for you when you're playing a team like the Memphis Grizzlies at the top of the West. And then just another stat for the fourth quarter: Spurs last in scoring margin overall,
Mm.
just in the league for the fourth quarter. But talking about Keldon as well, and that's kind of the ironic part, right? For us, who've watched him all year, we're like, this isn't a good game for Keldon. The Grizzlies broadcaster, their color guy, not their play-by-play guy, I forget his name. But he was like, he verbatim said, and I wrote it down, Keldon Johnson has been really good tonight. And I was like, that's just like the perspective of another team. It's like for him, it's like, yeah, he's not shooting well, but he gets to the line, for 12 shots basically. Or
Yeah.
12 points on the board and is able to get 24. Still, I would say, and I would agree with you, that this was not his best game for sure. If he was shooting well, the Spurs probably come out with a win in this one. I did have a nice block. I got to give him credit there. Jakob had 4 blocks in the first quarter. Was only able to have 1 later in the game, but still had 5 overall. 17, 13, and 5 is solid for Jakob. 3 for 5 from the free throw line as well, too. He got eviscerated, sent to the underworld once again by John Morant.
It's personal.
But, I just... with Ja, it's like there's nothing that he can do. What's he going to do? Foul him and make it an and one and then just make it more emphatic? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all that's going to do is hurt the team. So at that point, it's like, and most people, like, 9 out of 10 centers in the league are getting destroyed on that play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's just Ja. And that's one of the reasons why I love watching this Grizzlies team. Obviously, I don't like them when they play the Spurs. I don't like watching them then. But any other time, they're one of the most exciting teams in basketball for plays like that. Just, I guess, one last note on the game. Jay Rich, Doug, and Zach, you see them filling up the stat sheet. You talked about them as well. They really led the comeback in that fourth
They really
quarter.
did.
Stanley was in there for a little bit as well, making some plays, but the vets really led the comeback in that one. And now that I'm looking at the stat sheet, I knew Doug was hot shooting, but he had 5 boards tonight, a steal as well. Jay Rich was able to dish 5 assists with the steal and a block. And then Zach Collins, I didn't realize, had 12 boards tonight. Had 4 assists as well and 14. And one of the other things, not to cut you off, but you're about to talk about him, that the Grizzlies broadcasters were talking about how he does a really good job. And I think we've seen this improve over the season from our perspective of just jumping straight up.
That's
like,
what I was gonna say.
He still had 3 fouls tonight, but like, right. It was such an improvement. That was the big thing I saw tonight. There were so many plays that he made defensively that would have been fouls earlier in the year.
Yeah, his verticality has improved tremendously, and his physicality. I know he still gets beat up by stronger bigs, but he's still giving it his all. And effort wise, it's never a question with Zach. Another thing I was going to touch on, Jude, was Memphis has a unique strength that isn't seen a lot in modern NBA. They have 2 guys that are basically 7 feet tall, or 6'10", 6'11", in Steven Adams and JJJ. And so that's a matchup nightmare. We talked about that in matchup nightmare, and I know Sohan caught JJJ early, but they are really difficult to stop. When one has 12 boards and the other has 18, it was very difficult to stop even Tillman as well. I know he only had 4 boards, but he was a big, strong presence that kept the ball alive for them on the offensive end. I think we both had 17 offensive rebounds tonight, but the difference is second chance points. I don't have that stat in front of me, but I remember watching it in the game. I can get it
for you probably.
They were bullying us in second chance opportunities. So as much as I love Jeremy Sohan and Zach Collins and all the things that they do, they're just not physically strong or tall enough in Sohan's case to defend that. And then also we have Trey Jones out there who's getting switched. That John Morant, Steven Adams pick and roll is impossible to stop, because either Jaw's getting a layup or he misses the layup because Jakob contests well, helping, and then Steven Adams cleans it up, second chance point, easy. And even John Morant had like three cleanups of his own shot. Like he'd shoot a layup or a floater and follow it up for a tip back. Like that happened really very often. And it's not going to be an issue for every team, but for Memphis, that's a huge advantage and something that the Spurs need to figure out how to counter, because it was a problem all night long.
Yeah, the rebounding battle was won by Memphis tonight by 9, 57-48. And the discrepancy, it was actually completely even on the offensive side of the boards, which is surprising with what you're talking about. But 31-40 on the defensive boards. And early on in the first quarter, or at the end of the first half, it was 28-19 going into halftime. I wrote that down as well. And when you look at the 3-point, not to just to talk about other stats and to completely ignore what
you're
said.
Good. Do your thing.
But at the 3-point percentage tonight, listen
nuts.
to this, Ethan. This is crazy. I know in a 6-point game, it was 63% to 32% from 3. And they only made 3 more threes than us, but still, yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't miss, dude. I texted you that.
We were 11 of 34. They were 14 of 22. Yeah.
On an inbound play, Tyus Jones hit a fadeaway contested 3 from the corner. And Tyus Jones has become a capable 3-point shooter, but when he's hitting that and the rest of the team is following suit, it's very difficult to get any kind of momentum.
So another crazy thing tonight, the Grizzlies had more turnovers. They had, let me do some quick. They had
Less
14,
assists.
14 less assists, 33
Yeah.
to 19. The Spurs out assisted the Grizzlies tonight. More blocks, more steals. Those are minimal numbers. More fast break points, more points in the paint. The Spurs did have more fouls, but they did not have as many. They didn't have a flagrant or any technicals. Um, the Grizzlies did have more points off turnovers, but when you go to the ESPN stat sheet, the one thing that they don't have on here is second chance points, and that's the thing that I think would probably stand out, like you were mentioning earlier. Because when you look
Yeah.
at all those stats, it's like, how'd the Spurs? Okay, yeah, there's the 3-point stuff, but how did the Spurs lose this one? That would probably be, at least numbers wise, the main
Yeah.
thing.
They put it up on the screen, but it's you like you said, it's not on ESPN for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely one sided. I know we tied them with offensive rebounds, but we couldn't capitalize on that. It was a lot of getting the
Mm-hmm.
offensive rebound, dribbling it back
Right.
out, kicking it and Jakob had like 3 or 4 in a row, so that's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit skewed. Because Memphis was trying to get back in transition, and we were just crashing the boards like crazy toward the end of the game. Um,
Yep.
Tough
Yep.
loss, but at the end of the day, Jude, this is kind of what we wanted, right? Yesterday.
It's literally what we asked for yesterday, and this was an even better game than the one we got on Monday. And
Mhm.
and when we were talking about that, we didn't even think Ja was playing. And of
Yeah.
course, he comes in and has 38 tonight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So right, like you said, they did what we asked. But I wrote a lot more down in the first half. I don't know why. I watched, like, it wasn't like I wasn't paying attention as much in the second half. I just didn't like take away as much. And obviously, some of these plays that I'm about to mention, like I'm about to mention some good Sohan plays. These were very early in the game, and as the game went on, it got tougher for him. But I like him coming to the challenge and trying to, make a little statement to start the game against JJJ. We saw how that went, but
Mhm.
I saw a lot of double screen motion tonight that wasn't something that I'd noticed before. And they were running like Trey off a screen from Sohan and Jakob back to back, which basically gave Keldon the opportunity where he's either going to have a wide open 3 where he can pull it, or he's going to be in a 1-on-1 where he can take him off the dribble and try to outmuscle him. And usually it's a guard just based off the rotation. And that led to a nice drive and dish to Romeo, which was the first bucket of the game and Romeo's only bucket of the game. Unfortunately, at least it was a 3. You love to see that.
Yeah.
Sohan's poster, close to poster, pretty still a highlight reel dunk on Jaren Jackson and one. Love to
Mhm.
see that. Hit the free throw too. And Jakob got a block on the next play too, so that's one of those energy plays you love to see. He also had another ISO buck. Excuse me, I don't know what I just said. Tough. Jeremy had a tough ISO bucket on JJJ as well. He took him outside off the dribble, stopped once Jaren Jackson kind of checked him a little bit, but then he worked out of the post. So like adjusted and hit him in hit a contested jumper fade away after trying to work on him a little bit. So that was impressive for me. I like to see that. Him being 19 and getting an ISO, but I mean, that's a low standard, but y'all get what I'm saying. It was nice to see Jeremy get that bucket. That was tough in a one-on-one situation on Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't think JJJ was probably expecting that to start the game. Like you said, I haven't talked enough about Trey, and you talked a lot about Trey, and that's probably honestly the story of the night. He continued his scoring and did more with Keldon back. I mean, he facilitated, played great defense, had solid steals. I remember there was one possession specifically where he either got blocked or threw a steal. I want to say he got blocked or like just lost it. It was a turnover, bad play of some kind. Hustles down the floor, reads the transition pass, and gets a steal the next play. I'm trying to get the rest of his stats up in front of me here. 3 steals as well, right? So that was just one of those. Had a block, and 6 boards too. That's the other thing. Quietly,
Mhm.
like over the last like 20 games or so, Trey's got to be averaging at least like 4 boards a game.
And for a 6'2" guard,
Yeah, yeah.
like he's not out bullying big guys, but I think you said
Mm-hmm.
this in a previous post game. He's able to compete with other guards that are a little bit bigger, 6'5", 6'6", and still out rebound them. His hustle and his effort and his energy are immeasurable. He
Yeah,
never stops going 110%.
Coach K
And
guy for sure.
Coach K guy. And with a young team, that's extremely important because a lot of these dudes, especially when Memphis got up by 8, 10, 12, 13, even at 20, I think, at one point. You can kind of
Yeah.
see the energy level dip down. I think there was a point in the second quarter when our second unit was in. It really felt like
They
we
had
were
a
dragging.
44.1.
Yeah, we were dragging our feet along, and it felt like, okay, Memphis is about to run away with this game. And then Trey Jones comes in the most important moments makes the most important plays that swing the momentum in our direction. Then we're able to dwindle it down to 15 to 10, single digits, keep it around there until the fourth quarter when we got it down to 3. And without him, none of that happens. He's been the
Mm-hmm.
catalyst, in my opinion, all year long. Devin's our best player, Keldon probably our second best player, but without Trey Jones on this team, we don't have
No,
13
that's a
wins.
very good point.
And that's not a big win number, but it's definitely going to be like 5 or 6 without Trey Jones on the roster. He's
Yeah.
been the
Yeah.
glue the entire year.
Remember when he went out? That was a part
Yeah.
of that run where it was just like it was hard to watch games
Hmm.
because like the defensive stuff he does for the perimeter. Like obviously we talk about Jakob, but really as the season has progressed, it would be a bigger defensive drop off with Trey going out because we've
Yeah.
seen over this little stretch where Jakob was out, and Zach's improvement obviously has a lot to do with this, and the emergence of Charles Bassey as well. But you know that's less of a. There's almost less of an impact there now. You see less of an impact on the floor immediately with just the way we operate with Trey coming out in comparison to Jakob, which probably would have been something that we would have been like, that's a little bit of a stretch if you would have told us that in like September, you know.
Yeah. I don't want to continue to harp on this fact, Jude, but I called Trey Jones being a stud when we
Yeah,
drafted him that first summer league. He has continued to
they got to
improve,
run the
continued to
tape.
impress. Yeah, look back at my Twitter. It's up there. I retweeted it like last season when he had a good game. And so I might go
Yeah.
retweet it again now that he had 22, 6, and 6.
Uh-huh.
But he's one of the guys, Jude, that as we continue to rebuild and we're going to be drafting in the lottery, probably definitely this season,
Hmm.
probably next season as well. Um, I want to keep him long term. I know he's a second round pick. We don't often keep second round picks long term, but I'd like to keep him on the team for as long as humanly possible because he's such a quality point guard. And right now he's starting. Maybe we draft a guy like Scoot Henderson, who's supposed like a future All Star. Sure, we give him the
Right.
nod, but as a backup point guard coming off the bench, he to me is perfect, especially in this system.
Yeah, I think really all it has to do with is how that draft goes.
Yeah,
Another reason to root for Wembanyama.
yeah, true. The Trey Jones Wembanyama pick
Yeah,
and roll would be
yes,
nasty.
yeah. But unfortunately, there's just so many point guards like in the kind of in that top 5 area,
Hmm.
which probably they would if it came down to, you know, we've talked about this before. They would probably roll with Blake Wesley and an Amon Thompson or a Scoot Henderson. Um,
Hmm. And I have
but
no problem with that.
Right, and I don't either, but I get exactly what you're saying. There was a tweet that I saw today. Now I gotta pull this up. I gotta go find it. Talking, just basically justifying what you were talking about. Now that we're here in 2023, we can easily say um, that Trey Jones is a steal. Um, in his draft, and I can't, I'm trying to find the tweet right now, but basically when you look at like the guards that were drafted in that draft, he ranks like second in steals, like fourth in points, like you know what I mean, like just
Yeah.
most of the numbers, like all of the statistical categories for people in his draft, he's like top 5 for the guards in the 2020 draft, I believe.
Yeah.
And so can't find that right now, but that's basically what the gist of the tweet was. So he's definitely proven to be, you know, but he was a Duke guy. He was kind of similar to Keldon in the way that he fell. Because think about it, he was only 3 picks
Hmm.
apart from Keldon, but he was one of those guys. There was nothing wrong. Everybody loved him. Maybe he didn't have the greatest jumper coming out of college, but other than that, it was like this dude is probably going to be a solid NBA player. Coach K doesn't just start anybody at point guard. And like before that, you had Tyus, and even though these guys aren't like world beaters, they're dudes who are like have been a part of championship teams or contending teams in the NBA. Quinn Cook, obviously Kyrie. I mean, you could go down the list of Duke point guards, and it. When you think of it in that perspective, it's surprising he fell. But I mean, that's the same thing you're going to say about Keldon, and that's just the way the NBA works. So you're glad you got both of those guys and
Yeah.
others as
Yeah.
well. The Spurs are really good at finding those late round picks and making them something.
We got really
Unless
lucky.
unless they're
Yeah.
Quindary Weatherspoon.
Well, we don't speak about Quindary. There's only one Q on this podcast, and it's me. Um, anyway, we got really lucky with Trey Jones drafting him because he was our third string point guard, and people were like, we should bring in another point guard in free agency. Like
And
he
we
might be
traded
like
DeJounte.
we trade DeJounte. He's like, I don't think he
We
should
believe
start.
in
I think
him.
we should give
Yeah.
it to Primo because he's better than Trey Jones already. And then Primo does what he does, and he's gone. And we're like, I still think we should trade for somebody. And then Trey Jones has become a pinnacle of this roster.
His floater's inconsistent.
Nobody wants
he
to
can't
believe in Trey
shoot.
Jones.
You know what I mean? Like all these like criticisms we have,
Yeah.
he just continues to like he's just made them like go away as the
Yeah.
season has gone on. Yeah.
Love that.
Well, I guess we can. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, this was one last note I had about the game, and this is kind of a big theme throughout the year. And this just comes with youth. Is kind of the caveat. Like what I'm about to say. Like this would happen on any team that's youthful like this. Go look at the Rockets highlights, and you'll really know what I'm talking about when I talk about this. But indecisiveness, little hesitations, and those little things when they happen, it disrupts the flow of the offense. I mean, there's sometimes even on like dribble drives, I want to say I saw Keldon hesitate a little bit today, maybe even Trey in some instances. Obviously, we're talking about how solid those guys are playing also. But whenever that happens, it's just like the whole play. When you're playing against a team like the Grizzlies, like you got to be going 100, 110, like all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe not. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but like you got to be going you got to be going hard, basically playing cut. Like regardless of if you make a mistake, you can't think about what you're doing while you're doing it, or they're just going to take advantage of you.
Yes.
Whether that's on offense or defense, like you just got to go. And that's what's happening like in those little situations. And to be honest, that's probably what should be happening for 22-year-old Trey Jones and Keldon Johnson, or 23 they might be now. But the point is those guys, like, that's not going to happen forever. That's just where they're at right now. And whenever those happen, it, like I said, it disrupts the flow of everything, allows them to take advantage. And there's another point that I was going to make off of that, but I can't remember, Ethan.
I got a point. I got a point off of what you just said. It's like, it's sort of proof. I don't know the stats on this, but a perfect example of what you're saying is one of our most effective lineups as far as offensive cohesion and moving without the ball and passing with effectiveness and not hesitating is when we have Jay Rich, Doug McDermott, Zach Collins on the floor.
Stanley
together.
Johnson too.
Stanley Johnson. Those are veterans, like big, not big names. Like we'd rather it be Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, whoever, but they're able to execute at a higher level because they've been at this. They have more reps. They've been in the league for a longer time. They're just not as explosive and not quite as talented, perhaps. But once our starters and our other young players find that mindset and they get to that comfort level, I agree with what you're saying. We'll look a lot better. But that hesitancy, it really derails our offense because we're based on, not being able to react to what we're doing because we're doing it so quickly.
Right. And and they just don't want to make a mistake. That's kind of the other point that I was getting to. It's like they're thinking like, oh, should I do this or should I do this? It's like, just do one or the other. You're going to have a better chance at making it regardless. But that's something, once again, young players are going to have to learn. Like every young player has to learn that, especially in this situation where you have such a young team. But yeah, just talking about some other Spurs news that we saw today. Blake Wesley, you sent me a tweet. Pop basically said he's going to be in the G League a little bit longer. Was basically
he was there tonight, but
right. And I guess what that makes me wonder is, I don't know, I know obviously Devin's injury plays into this, but I don't know. I don't know if we're going to trade Jay Rich and Doug.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I know we've been saying that the whole time. Those are the most likely candidates, but like I said, they're getting more minutes because of the Devin Vassell injury, but are they really though? Because I mean, I don't think we'd play Romeo over either of them. I think he kind of got benched tonight too. So we would probably just plug Devin back into that starting lineup. Their demeanor, like, it's different than it was when they were sitting, and it might just be because they're playing. The more I'm thinking about this, maybe it's not. This is just my feeling from sitting across the TV, which doesn't really have much substantiation, but I don't know. My feelings in the waters right now, Ethan, is that we might keep those guys a little bit longer, especially with the Blake thing. That's what this is tying into. Remembering that, because we're gonna need another playmaker.
Yeah.
And not to say, obviously, like we're letting Malachi do that a little bit, but like Jay Rich really did that tonight with the 5 assists, and there were multiple times where he was, pointing, setting up the offense, all that stuff.
They've definitely looked a lot better. I'm really not sure what the Spurs are going to do, because every time we try and guess what they're going to do, they don't do what we say. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we decided to just keep them and run into the offseason and reload with our draft picks and just run it back again. But just add a lottery pick to the roster. I'd like to see Blake Wesley get some minutes, but I understand where Pop is coming from. He's coming off of an injury. He's a young point guard. I'm sure he's making some mistakes. He is making some mistakes in Austin. So let him get reps there. Let him try and get more comfortable. And he said that the only reason he's being brought up, on top of the Devin injury, of course, just for depth, is so he can be around the guys, kind of feel a part of the team, get used to the atmosphere. And all that's great. I have no problem with that. Either way, we're going to lose. So
yeah.
If we trade them, I'm sure he'll get more playing time. But for now, Pop, he's going to give it to Jay Rich and Doug and Romeo.
Yeah. I think that we'll definitely see, like, later in the season,
For
some
sure.
Blake Wesley 15-minute, 20-minute type games.
Absolutely.
And also, of course, the trade deadline, if they do end up doing something like you said, that could totally allow him to play as well. But the other thing I'm remembering while you're here is it's like, what did DeJounte Murray do his first season? What did Derek White do his first season? They were in Austin the whole time. And I'm thinking about this because they just did the tribute video for Derek. And I think I was watching the JJ Redick podcast with Derek, just where it's him talking about his time in the Spurs, and he's like, well, I was in Austin most of the time, my first year. And so it's like with any of those guys, and Blake was drafted not at 29 but at 25, in that same area. So they're just, because it's a point guard, like Malachi, one I think was a steal. Like I forget where he was rated on Jay Bilas's thing, but it was much more like, it was like towards the lottery. So I think that's why he's just on the team already. And he's not like, there's more whenever it comes to the offense on the point guard's plate. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Where obviously we're having Malachi do that a little bit, but as I just mentioned, it's mainly Jay Rich, and they just want him to be a combo guard. So that I think is probably why Blake. That is another reason. One, he's making mistakes in the G League, but also there's more. It's going to be easier for him when he comes up to run the offense if he's already done it in Austin.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can preview the Alamo Dome game a little bit. We already talked about it yesterday. I mean, one, the vibes are going to be immaculate. I'm so happy to go. And of course, this was the big news. This was the brand new news. The ticket record was broken today. So we'll break the attendance record. I will be a part of history. Nobody can ever say I won't be.
Good for you, Jude.
I'm historic, Ethan.
You are. You've always been historic in my book, but
well, now I just feel bad.
It's okay.
I'm sorry you're in Dallas and can't enjoy it.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll enjoy it just fine on the television. I'll probably have a better seat than you, Jude. No offense.
For my tickets, you definitely will. But the other thing is about, well, I'm gonna just be watching. I might be watching it on a TV too.
Yeah, pretty much.
So how about that?
That's pretty cool. I'll give you that. You'll get a free shirt out of it. It'll be a great time, I'm sure.
Okay, so about the event that we're going to, though, it was like there were supposed to be like 150 people that were able to join, and only like 40 people did. And so that means it's standing room only. So that means there's going to be more space for us to see. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because there's less people that signed up, and there's like a designated area. So
that'd be fun time. It'd be fun time.
Hopefully the Road Warrior curse will prevail in San Antonio, because that's about their only hope for them winning that game.
Well, the fans will certainly be a contributing factor in the Warriors' potential demise if they decide to be the Road Warriors, like you're saying.
Yeah. We'll see. It would just be all for San Antonio, and it would be a great win. Don't you think?
Yes,
Ethan?
I think so.
The lucky number 14, it's twice a 7. So
It's the game's on Friday the 13th. I was hoping it'd be on Friday the 14th so we could get our 14th win on the 14th. But
well, crazy things happen on Friday the 13th. That's the
yep,
perfect time for the Spurs to upset the Warriors. We appreciate
exactly.
y'all. Thanks for hanging out for SSPN postgame. I realized I kind of just cut you off there a little bit.
No, you're
Ethan. So any
good. Do your
final
thing.
thoughts before we leave? Okay, we're good. We're going to keep rolling. We appreciate y'all. We'll catch y'all in the next one. We hope y'all have a great time at the Alamo Dome or watching at the Alamo Dome. I'm sure some of you are probably going with how many people are going. But if you
Yeah.
aren't, I'm sure you'll be enjoying it. It's going to be a great game. Should be a great environment. We're finally on ESPN. Hopefully you get to watch it too, and you don't have to do a bunch of internet streams like your boy here. Go Spurs, go.